get started now. So, hello everybody. Thank you for attending our October 2020 meeting for the Naples chapter of the Florida Native Plant Society. My name is Andy Nacarado. I'm the chapter president and also the meeting host for this evening. I'm also joined by my fellow board member, our treasurer and membership chair, Wade Gurley. And to start off the meeting, we'll go through our basic Zoom housekeeping as usual. So as you join the meeting, you'll notice that your camera and your microphones are turned off. And we have it set up that way just to help us preserve the sound quality of the presentation. We are recording this meeting so that we can post the presentation later on our website, which is fnpsnaples.org. as well as on our YouTube channel. And if you have a question at any time during the meeting, please use the chat feature that's within Zoom to enter your questions. And at the end of our feature presentation, we'll answer as many questions as we have time for. So that should do it for our Zoom housekeeping. I'm going to move through a few other exciting announcements. Here we go. So I am very happy to announce that October is officially Florida Native Plant Month. So I hope that everybody is taking a little extra time to appreciate their favorite Florida native plants, whether that's in your home garden or maybe along your favorite hiking trail. And I have something exciting to announce related to Florida Native Plant Month for this year. The Naples chapter has partnered with the Naples Botanical Garden in order to offer Naples chapter members a chance to win a free private native plant tour within the Botanical Garden. So there will be one winner who's randomly selected, and all you have to do to be eligible to win is be a member of the Naples chapter of the Florida Native Plant Society by October 31st. So if you are already a Naples chapter member, there's nothing more you need to do. You'll be in the pool to possibly be selected as the winner for the private tour. If you are not yet a member of the Naples chapter, you might be wondering, how can you become a member? It is quite easy to do. So you'll visit our website, again, that's fnpsnaples.org, and click on the blue Join Us button in the top right corner of the website. And that'll take you to the website of our parent organization, the Florida Native Plant Society. And you'll see the different options for becoming a member. You can see at the individual level, it starts as low as $35 a year to be a member. And if you're a full-time student, it starts at $15 a year to be a member. So if you are joining our meeting tonight and you would like to become a member of the Naples chapter, of course, we encourage you to do so to help us fulfill our mission of preserving, conserving, and restoring Florida native plants, and also for your chance to win that private tour in Naples Botanical Garden. All right. Another announcement that I have is related to the importance that our native plants and native ecosystems have in Collier County in particular. And that is the Conservation Collier referendum that is on the current presidential ballot. Of course, early voting has started. The last day to vote is November 3rd. This Conservation Collier referendum is meant to reestablish funding for our county managed preserves. So if you have, just checking out the chat real quick, if you have already voted, then you will see that this Conservation Collier referendum comes all the way at the end of the ballot. So if you have not yet voted, make sure you get all the way to the end so you can vote on the Conservation Collier referendum. And the Naples chapter does encourage you to vote yes to reestablish funding to help Collier County continue purchasing preserved lands and maintain the preserved lands that we already have. And that includes really popular places like the Gordon River Greenway and Freedom Park, and many other preserves that are scattered throughout the county. If you have already voted, I also encourage you to just talk to your neighbors to make sure that they're aware of the Conservation Collier referendum and tell them why native plants in our ecosystems are so important to you. If you would like to learn even more about this referendum, you can again visit our website. If you click on About Us at the top menu, one option will be conservation that you can click on, and it'll bring you to this section of our website. It's a really excellent article by a Yes Conservation Collier volunteer named Gladys that gives more detail about the need for the referendum, as well as many of the native plants that are protected by Conservation Collier preserves. So it's a very interesting read. And if you want to find out how you can do more to promote the passage of the Conservation Collier referendum, you can visit their website at yesconservationcollier.org. Okay, my final announcement before our feature presentation is that the Naples chapter is getting ready for an election of our own. This is something that we do once a year to nominate and elect our board of directors. So for the board of directors, anyone who's a member of the Naples chapter is eligible to be nominated to serve on the board of directors. All the positions are served on a volunteer basis. You're able to nominate yourself, or you can nominate someone else as long as they give their consent to serve on the board of directors. And if you would like to either nominate yourself or learn a little bit more, please send us an email by October 21st. And our email address is shown on the screen here, naplesnativeplants@fnps.org. And you can see here the different positions on our board of directors. We have 4 officer positions: president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. We also have a series of director positions that focus on topics such as communications, conservation, membership, outreach, programs, and plant sales. And to give you just a little bit of an idea, over the last couple of years, the communications and outreach and plant sales positions have been vacant. So we are looking for 2 to 3 more people on our board of directors so that we can have even more accomplishments coming from our chapter, especially in those areas. If you think you might be interested, but you're not sure, you want to learn more, a good way to do that is to send us an email and ask if you can shadow one of our board meetings, so you'll have a little bit better of an idea of how those meetings go. Or you can choose to volunteer for a specific task or activity that helps the Naples chapter without serving on the board of directors. And we do have 2 members who volunteer to manage our Facebook page and our website without technically being on the board of directors. So if you're interested in nominating yourself or volunteering in another way, we would really love to hear from you. So just contact us by October 21st. Okay. Now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our featured speaker this evening. We have Melinda Schumann with us. She is a biologist for the Conservancy of Southwest Florida, and she'll be talking to us tonight about managing scrub habitat for gopher tortoises. So thank you for being here tonight, Melinda.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so that you can share yours.
Is it ready?
It should be ready for you to share your screen.
There we go. Okay, I hope everybody can hear me. There we go. You good? Okay. Hi, everybody. Hope you're having a good evening. Thanks for inviting me to talk a little bit about our Christopher B. Smith Preserve here at the Conservancy of Southwest Florida. I'm a biologist here with the Conservancy. I've been with them since 2002. I mainly specialize in anoran amphibians, so frogs and toads. But ever since we've acquired the property here, I've been able to work with the tortoises in the scrub habitat and just learn more about them. So it's very interesting, and I appreciate you letting me come talk a little bit about them. I'm hoping to talk a little bit about the history of the preserve, the habitat out there, our gopher tortoise population, and then different ways in which we try to manage it as best as we can to keep it healthy for everybody living out there. So without further ado, the preserve is located on the Conservancy campus, which is in the heart of Naples. It was purchased originally, well, originally it was destined to become housing. And then it was purchased and saved by the wonderful Jeannie and Christopher Smith for preservation and to become a new conservancy entrance, which I'll talk about in a second, but mostly for preservation for the gopher tortoises that live out there. And that was started in 2005, and then that took a few years until it was finalized. So a little bit of the history, deep history, which in Naples in general, we have a lot of really neat deep history. After the property was purchased, we started clearing it out and finding what was out there. It was very overgrown, and we started finding items like these shells, which represent the archaic people who used to live in this area. These are shell tools, a couple of hammers and a scraping tool that we just found on the property, and they kind of remind you of that history that was once here. Most likely these are connected with perhaps the Calusa people who used to live in this area. That would definitely be a whole presentation in itself, but it's good to remember that when you're talking about these little scrub preserves that are left. And also just that the scrub community was pretty vast here. Let me show you the next screen. Oh, I don't have it up yet, sorry. We are just south of the zoo. So we're neighbors with the zoo in town, and you have the mall, which is right across the street from that. And from what I've been told, that was one of the most beautiful scrub habitats most people had seen when they lived here back in the day, 50 years ago. From the stories I've heard, that was just gorgeous. And now a mall sits on top of it. And just up the road from that is the Naples Preserve, which is another little small holding of gopher tortoises in a tiny little preserve. So what we have left are just remnants of what once was. So fast forwarding quite a few years to the 1950s, 1960s, this property was also a citrus farm. And so they grew lemons and limes, from what I understand, because we actually have remnants of this agriculture that happened there still out in the preserve. Hidden away in some of the more overgrown areas, we still find lemon trees and lime trees, and they still fruit every year. So it just reminds us of that time, long past now. But you still have these little hints of it, and it's very interesting when you start learning more about it. But then we get to around 2009, I believe this map was from. This is what the preserve looked like. A lot of things started changing in this area that year. So the road that runs up across, I can't really point, sorry, but on the left-hand side of the screen, that's Goodlit-Frank. And the road that runs just under the preserve is 14th Avenue. And really traffic started getting heavier. The gopher tortoises that lived on the preserve would go up north there. You see that kind of grassy field and forested area right above the sandy scrub area. That was the old zoo parking lot. It was just a grassy field. And next to that was this really cool pine forest. All that within, gosh, I think the year this picture was taken, or maybe the next year, That all got paved over. It's now the parking lot for the zoo and the entrance to the Gordon River Greenway, which arguably both of those things were important as well. However, that was really important feeding ground for this tortoise population because a lot of them would go there. But with things getting crazy, a lot of our tortoises were getting hit by cars, frankly. They would be walking onto the Goodlet Frank Road or to 14th Avenue trying to feed in the neighbors' grass, you know, on their lawns. And so a lot of tortoises were getting hit. So around 2008, a fence was put in. This is when the Conservancy owned the property. We just went ahead and enclosed the area, and this prevented more tortoises from getting hit. And also, a new entrance to the Conservancy was put in. In the map, you can kind of see a bit of a squiggly footprint. That is where the new entrance was put in. However, they went to great lengths to do it in a way that would not harm any tortoises. Usually when roads, they made the road elevated first off, so the tortoises can walk back and forth from one side to another safely. And also they used a technique called vibracores. Instead of, when they put the main posts to hold up the road, instead of like pounding them in as they normally would, they actually vibrated them into the ground so that they wouldn't cause any burrow collapses and things like that, which, you know, is a little more expensive, but it was a good way to handle that and to try and keep the integrity of the preserve as best as they could. So a little bit about the preserve. It's about 7.5 acres, various habitats. It's very much a patchwork, oak, rosemary dominated scrub, some pine flatwoods. We have a little tropical hardwood hammock in there, and a marshy area, which you can see in the picture. And that pond has been in there a very long time. That's an old area. It was in there with the citrus farms and before. We have dozens of tortoises living on the property, and there's over 1,000 species of other organisms have been identified to date. And I want to throw credit to our volunteer, Susan Leach Snyder, because she has painstakingly cataloged all these species. You can actually go to her website and learn about every species she has discovered in this preserve. She has done, I actually gave the link, I have the link here, but I also sent it to Wade and he can share it with the group if anyone's interested. She has done vegetation surveys for all the vegetation. She's a trained entomologist, so she's sampled for all the invertebrates here. I mean, it's pretty fascinating. She's worked for years on this, and I highly suggest you go check out the website if you're interested in that kind of thing, because you really can see how much life can be in such a small little area. It's really interesting. So I feel like when, you know, for people like you guys who are interested in native plants and you care about nature, you know, we can have a conversation and I can tell you about the scrub habitat, and, you know, you care, it makes sense, and you want to save it when you learn more about it. But for the average person, when you start telling them scrub, you know, what is scrub? It's white sandy soil that has very little nutrients and it drains quickly, and it really doesn't have a lot growing on it. It's very plain for most of the year. You have a hard time really selling that. The marketing for it is awful. And sadly, it is one of the most endangered habitats in Florida. And I'm not sure if this is true, but I read somewhere like in Collier County, we've lost 97% of our scrub, something like that. I mean, it's tragic. It is really tragic because scrub habitat is phenomenal. I mean, if you know it, when the rains start, it's beautiful and it just erupts with life. It is such a cool habitat, and we've lost so much. So I feel like it does need some marketing help. Unfortunately, you know, humans want to build on those dry uplands, and that's exactly what it is. And that's really, it's hard to battle that, especially here in South Florida. But I feel like the Gopher Tortoise can be our ambassador species. It's the ambassador for the scrub. I mean, when you look at that face, it's adorable. And the personality is amazing. They're just the coolest little critters. And once you get to know them, it's hard not to love them and want to know they're protected. And I think they're our key to protecting habitats that are maybe a little bit harder to warm people up to. So I don't know. I think that's our ticket. So ever since we fenced off the preserve, we get this. They learn about, it's a tortoise preserve, it's a tortoise preserve. And unfortunately, you know, anybody can kind of own anything as a pet. And these guys grow up and people don't want them anymore and they drop them off. I know the Naples Preserve has this same issue a lot. But what we have here is a red-footed tortoise on the left and a Russian tortoise on the right. And unfortunately, after the fence went up, we eventually found these guys walking around. And it's a shame because they're really cool critters in their own right, but we can't have exotic tortoises kind of competing for the resources that our native gopher tortoises need. So they have to go. But fortunately, we were able to find good homes for both of these little guys, which is good. But this does happen a lot. And it's just one of those things. The more the community learns about the tortoise preserve, you know, the more they just figure it's the best place for their pet when they don't want them anymore. So there's that. But we also have a native box turtle. So for people that maybe aren't as familiar with your native turtles and tortoises, we like these guys. These are great. And we have a handful of them in our preserve. You don't really see them very often. When we do our systematic surveys for the tortoises, we just start bumping into them like, oh, there's one. So we know we have about 5 or 6 out there. And they're really cool. They don't want anything to do with you, but they're neat. And the little picture on the bottom, you can see the actual little shell can fold up and they can be completely enclosed in their little box, a box turtle. The gopher tortoises can't do that. Their arms and legs and heads, I mean, there's no going in the shell in this manner. Their only protection is their burrow. So you can tell the difference between the two in that manner. So the burrow is pretty amazing. These gopher tortoises, they dig these burrows, these are their homes, and they get very deep depending on the location, depending on where these are being dug. But they dig them right into the sand and it goes all the way down to the water table so that they can stay hydrated at the bottom of these burrows. And because they change their environment so drastically by digging these, they're what we call ecological engineers. They change their habitat. And these burrows are pretty amazing. By doing this and creating these, they actually create habitat for up to 350 different species. All these species have been found to be living in these burrows with the tortoises. So that's pretty amazing. And by creating this habitat for these other species, that actually makes them a keystone species. I believe I actually highlighted the definition of this. So the definition of a keystone species is a species which other species in the ecosystem largely depend, such that if that species were to be removed, the ecosystem would change drastically. So that makes our gopher tortoise species. If we were to remove them, the habitat would change. It would no longer be what it is, which is this amazing habitat for these other creatures. Unfortunately, they also have the not so positive title of being in a threatened species here in Florida. So they're state listed threatened here in Florida, and they are actually federally listed endangered in like one small area of Alabama, I think it's in Alabama, but I believe they need to be uplisted here in Florida as well. They need to be endangered because their habitat is just dwindling so drastically, and they serve such an important purpose for so many other animals. I believe that is being worked towards. I hope that does happen. And the neat thing is not only are gopher tortoises protected in Florida, but so are their burrows. So you cannot harm a gopher tortoise and you cannot harm their burrow. You can't go anywhere near them. You can't mess with the apron area in front of the burrow. So all of that is protected, which is a very good thing. So when we're talking about managing the preserve, you know, we always want to think about it as the integrity of the scrub preserve, because on the whole, a lot of other animals depend on it besides just the gopher tortoise. But as somebody that's always thinking about it out there, I can't help but focus on the little bellies of the tortoise. It's quite natural. There's all these little army helmets walking around out there, and they all need to eat. And here in South Florida especially, I feel like there's no break in the year. We're so warm down here that they're eating all year long, and they're foraging, and it takes a big hit on the habitat. So I'm always thinking like, okay, how can we get more forage out there? How can we, you know, increase it, make sure they have enough, things like that. And I do feel that by protecting the needs of the tortoise, you will inadvertently protect the scrub as well. So we do our best. So what do they eat? Well, they eat a lot of things. Let's see, what is the number? They're known to eat up to like 376 different genera of plants. So a lot. They have a very wide possibility in their diet. But in a perfect world, 70 to 80% of their diet is going to be grass. So they need grass and lots of grass. Fortunately, they're a very adaptable species. So while, once again, in a perfect world, they're going to have a good variety of native grass, they're also able to kind of make do with some exotic grass. So a lot of times they'll be attracted to yards and things like that with St. Augustine and Bermuda grass are two examples. And they'll be perfectly fine on that. They just need a good amount of it. They generally spend like 80% of their time in the burrow, but when they're out, they need to eat and they need to forage. And so grass is definitely key. However, they're also attracted to colors. They like fruits, they like flowers, they like all those things. And they'll go around and they'll sniff everything. You'll see them when they're foraging. They smell everything, and then they choose what they want to eat. So who knows what's going on in their little heads when they're doing this, but everything gets smelled, and then they decide what they want to eat that day. So they're pretty interesting. So other edibles that they eat, they love fruit. Fruit. In fact, I don't know of a fruit or vegetable that we eat that they won't eat. They're pretty good with anything. But fortunately, we have native fruit that they really enjoy. So these are pond apples. We have pond apples going around the marshy area. And as they fall, the gopher tortoises love them. But a lot of times they fall into the water. So I go out there when it's pond apple season with a net. And I just kind of scrape them all out of the water. And then I make little piles throughout the preserve where the gopher tortoises will find them. And often you'll just see like 3 gopher tortoises at the pile all feeding at once. They really like those kind of treats and everything. So love fruit. And then some of the other edibles that you can find in our preserve. I just did some examples of pictures I had, but starting in the bottom left, that's that ground creeping mimosa, the ones with the powder puff flowers. They love those. Next to that is, I know this has another common name, but I call them touch-me-nots. They have the little spines all over the flowers, all over the leaves. And they like to eat the flowers off of them, but then they'll eat the leaves too. And then liatris, that plays a big role in our preserve. You don't see them most of the year, but then when summer starts, you start to see them sprout up. And then by August and September, the whole place is just covered in purple. It's very beautiful. And the tortoises love foraging on that. And then next to that, we have some Richardia. So this is an exotic that most of you probably know. However, it really is a good food source for the tortoises. So that's one of those situations where we make the compromise. We do work hard to get rid of as many of the exotics as we can in the preserve, but if it serves a bit of a purpose as forage, we tend to focus on the ones that don't for removal. And then next to that is a Florida scrub frostweed. We've seen them munching on those when they're in bloom. And then finally, I put a picture of some grape leaves up in the upper left-hand corner. I feel like this is a bit of an unsung hero. I will tell you more about that plant and the vital purpose it serves in the preserve, but is definitely a food source for the tortoises as well. Also, they love mushrooms and they love lichens. So you have them eating all these. It's kind of a battle between the tortoises and the squirrels for all the different mushrooms. But when we get a heavy rain, it is alive with these guys. There's so many different species popping up. And then the lichens are especially good for the little ones. The little tortoises really like the lichens to munch on. And then I know this is a far away picture over on the left. However, that tortoise is actually chewing on a bone. So there are some old bones out there, and they're known to do this as like possibly a calcium supplement. And so tortoises will definitely chew on bones. And I just caught him doing it from afar, and I wanted to get a picture before he ran. So yeah, it's pretty interesting what they will forage on. And so sometimes I feel like we get really focused on the adults, and we kind of, it's easy to forget the needs of the little ones. These little tortoises are so tiny, and you often forget they're there because they're so tiny. But they play a major role in the demographics out there. And I'm fairly certain our tortoises can breed all year round, because once again, it just doesn't get that cold here. And I've seen evidence of eggs being depredated by other animals all times of the year, which tells me there's eggs being laid in the aprons of the burrows just all the time. So these little guys are important. And in the middle picture, when I was doing the tortoise survey just this past year, I found this tiny little hatchling burrow, or at least juvenile burrow, maybe not hatchling. I'm pretty sure they won't dig the burrows as hatchlings. But that's a tiny little tortoise burrow, and I put the quarter in front of it just to give an idea of how small that actually was. So these guys are very easy to miss, and it gives you the kind of the idea that, you know, their needs are like about a half an inch to an inch off the ground. So we need to like think about that when we're managing for food supply and things like that. They can't climb, they can't reach very high at all. So all their food has to be available at that level. And this is the importance of the grapevine. So basically when I look at this, I see a gopher tortoise nursery. They need this. And oftentimes when people approach an area like this and they're like, okay, time to clean it up, you know, this is the first thing to go. You know, you think you want it to look nice, and you think landscaping and clearing it, and or maybe even opening ground cover for other plants. But if you remove this, you remove pretty much the only protection that those little gopher tortoises have. This is the only thing standing between them and the mouths of birds, coyotes, raccoons, anything that might want a little gopher tortoise snack. So these are vital. And we make sure to not remove these big patches of grapevine from the preserve when we're doing maintenance and exotic removal and things like that. And also, you know, these grapevines, they crawl up trees and things like that, and the birds will nest behind them as well. So these are definitely an important resource. We try to leave as much of this as we can without letting it, of course, just take over everything. But very important plant. And so this is probably the most important thing we need in the preserve that we don't have. I don't even have a picture of a burn of my own. I had to borrow this from the internet. We have been trying to get a prescribed fire in the preserve for years now. And there's always something that prevents it, or it doesn't happen. And it's really a shame. And I know the Naples Preserve has been trying as well. These little urban oases, you know, they need that. The habitat is not healthy without fire. It needs fire. scrub habitat especially, but also the pine habitat that's out there. The vegetation community, it really just can't be proper. It can't be taken care of properly without fire, and also just nutrient cycling in the soil. So we do our best with what we have, but this is one of the most important things that I want to see happen in our preserve, and I've been trying and it just has not come through yet. So, I mean, I will even open that for anyone here who might know some leads, you know, someone that would be willing to do a prescribed burn in the middle of town. That's not as easy as you might think. But we need someone with that capability and that's willing to do it and do it right and, you know, do it safely, but bring some fire to the habitat because it's really important. It can never function properly without it, really. However, in the absence of fire, we have people power. And so I always tell people that the most important thing, the backbone of the Conservancy really, are their volunteers. I mean, our volunteers, they keep us going. They work in all departments and they give so much. But for this Gopher Tortoise Preserve, it would not be what it is today without our volunteers. It was quite an overgrown mess when we first got it. I mean, it was bad. So we had people out there helping us just pull out this overgrown area that you couldn't even walk through, and then continuously helping us remove exotics. Really, I think the biggest part of land management is exotic removal. I don't know, it's not exciting, but it's really necessary because exotic plants, they can take over so quickly. And so this is absolutely a labor of love. Our volunteers are wonderful. The group in the bottom photo is our current group of volunteers from last season. I grabbed a picture of them real quick before they left. Basically what they do is from November through May, they come here and help us one morning a week. And they just work really hard in the preserve, pulling things out. And that really is one of, you know, especially without fire, that's really the only thing keeping up with that and trying to keep the vegetation in check and the exotics in check. So we love our volunteers. We do try to do some native plantings. You know, this isn't always as successful as I would hope it would be. We've tried a lot of different things. We've tried seeds, we've tried little starts, getting them started. I'd say the prickly pear has been the most successful. I feel like they're just the easiest ones to work with. They seem to do best with being planted out there and actually establishing. And I do notice some of the seeds we've put out there, I will see them popping up here and there. So some of the other things have been successful, but we just haven't had a great deal of success with native plantings out there. But it is another tool in the tool case, so to speak, because it is just another way to get forage out there. And we try, and we will keep trying. But I would say that the prickly pears are probably our most successful to date. And then finally, I want to say this was about 2 years ago. I did a little experiment out there. And so we made these 10-foot by 10-foot enclosures. I think that was about what it was. And I put one in scrub habitat, pine habitat, and oak habitat. And I kind of wanted to see, my thinking was that since the tortoises are constantly grazing, they're not allowing the plants to really reach maturity and then seed and then return that for the next cycle. Everything was getting mowed down too quickly. So I thought if we basically excluded them from a section for maybe 9 months, would it be possible that things could actually get more established and not get grazed down too quickly? And then of course we'd let the tortoises back in just to see what would happen if they were excluded for a good long period. And out of all 3 that we did, we found that the scrub habitat actually worked the best. And you can see it, that was the before. All the scrub just looked very plain like that. And then this is the after. And we actually did have quite a lot of success from that. You can see a close up there, a lot of stuff took off and it was able to remain untouched by those little mouths for a while. And I feel like this is kind of, this has a lot of potential. We could possibly do this on a larger scale in some areas of the preserve. I think this is sort of a method that they use with cattle, you know, like you just keep them out of one area for a while, let them graze on the other side and then switch it, you know, and then let them in that side and then protect the other side. And I feel like this actually could be a viable method for long term. And, you know, these could be also enhanced. We could plant them, we could do things and just give vegetation a chance to come back before they come in and do their thing. So those are really the main methods that we've been using out there. Some more successful than others, but it's always a process and we try and have fun with it. And the Gopher Tortoises are cute, so it's easy. And that's what I got for you. Thanks so much. And if anybody has any questions, please let me know.
Thank you so much, Melinda. That was a really excellent and fascinating presentation.
Thank you.
I have some more I would like to say to you, but first, if anybody has a question, please put it in the chat at this time, and I will check in a minute to see what kind of questions we have coming in for Melinda. I also wanted to share that since I grew up here in Naples and I had many weekends going to the Conservancy as a child, it's always really fascinating for me to learn things about places that I've been going to for years and years that I never knew.
Absolutely.
I never knew the importance of the muscadine grapevine to the hatchling gopher tortoises, but it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, yeah. Nature's amazing. It really is.
I'm going to start checking the chat for our questions. See, we have a question that just came in from Wade Gurley. He says, what would you say is the most problematic exotic that you deal with in the preserve?
That's a good question. I want to say the earleaf acacia is probably, maybe just currently, honestly. It takes over so fast and it gets so big so fast. Our volunteers are able to take care of a lot if they catch it small, but once it gets big, I mean, you got to get out there and chainsaw it and it just drops so much. It just keeps, the process just keeps repeating. It feels a little overwhelming. And we also get those, what are they called? The potatoes?
The air potato.
The air potatoes. And you can just find those everywhere in areas that you didn't even know they were, and they're just hidden back there. And yeah, it really feels a bit like a nightmare. Fortunately, we don't have a lot of things like melaleuca. We were able to take care of a lot of the Brazilian pepper. So we win some and we lose some, I guess, but they can all be pretty frustrating.
Yes, I hear that. Wade does have a follow-up to his question. He asked, do you treat the exotic plants with chemicals or manual or mechanical removal?
It's almost 100% manual and mechanical, only because I've always been very leery about putting chemicals out there with the tortoises. I'm probably too leery about it. I think in some instances, and especially at the beginning when we had really big trees we needed to deal with, we did more of that. However, now, like I said, if we can keep it when it's small, we just do it all mechanical and all hand clearing. And it takes an exceptional amount of effort. And then, we do have people here at the Conservancy that can safely use the chemical, and I think it might be something we will incorporate a little bit more, but I will always be on the very moderate side with that, and as little as possible.
Thank you. Yeah, Wade followed up with that. He was curious about the tortoise chemical interaction. So
it makes me nervous too. Yeah. Yep.
We also have a question from Linda. She asks, how old are the oldest tortoises in the preserve?
We really don't know. A lot of them, so we started actually monitoring them in 2008, and some of those tortoises are still there. There are big old tortoises, and they are big, but there's no way to really age them as far as I know. Not really super accurately. So I'm not entirely sure, but I know that they are they were big when we found them, and that was 12 years ago. So, yep.
We have a question from Michelle. She says, what is the population size of the gopher tortoises, and is it increasing?
No increases. I don't actually know exactly what it is right now, which is why I don't have a good number for you. We have several dozen out there, but it's been a few years since we've really done an extensive survey. But it's not, the population isn't going to increase at this point because they lost that whole feeding ground that was up north that I mentioned. That allowed the population to grow. At this point, it's an enclosed area, so there's not really much way for them to increase, but we are hoping that it can be a stabilized population in there. And the demographics look good from the last time I was there and monitored. We had a good curve. Babies, older tortoises, and a lot of the adult middle. So it looked good.
Are any of the gopher tortoises individually marked in the preserve?
Yep. The vast majority should be at this point. You miss some, unless you're bucket trapping and actually getting in there. But we have been marking since 2008. That's how we know we still have some individuals from then. And we do little drill marks on the side of the shells, the little scoots. It's like fingernail material. Each scoot represents a different number. And so in that way, we have a system to number for a long time, I assume, the higher up we go. And each tortoise gets an individual little drill number. And then that's how we know through each monitoring session who is who. And they do grow out as well. And we have lost some that way, which is very frustrating. So if they grow real fast between the times you monitor, you can lose them. But it's our best method right now.
Got it. We have a few more questions. One question or two questions from Kipfer, and I apologize if I've mispronounced your name. He or she asks, are you worried about inbreeding depression and any plans for translocations to increase genetics? Two good questions.
Yeah, those are really good questions. We don't have any reason to believe that's happening yet. However, in the future, it is possibly something we would look into, especially with a nice close neighbor population like Naples Preserve. I feel like there could be some potential there because we don't want that. We don't want the genetics to become weak and them to start, developing illnesses and things like that. But as it stands right now, we haven't been nervous about it yet, but we do understand that possibility is there. And, it's something we probably will look into at least in the future.
That sounds good. And we have two questions from Karen Allman. One is, are there any opportunities for the Conservancy to preserve additional remnant scrub habitat elsewhere in the Naples area?
Not as far as I know. Yeah, not as far as I know, and nothing attached to this, that's for sure. Nothing would be contiguous with this parcel. It is, yeah, it's hard to come by, and each one is separated so far from the other. There's nothing I've heard of, so no, unfortunately, nothing that I know of at this time.
And Karen's other question is, in terms of prescribed fire, have you coordinated with Florida Forestry, Urban Prescribed Fire Forester? Or because you are nonprofit and not residential, can they not assist?
You know, I'm not sure. I feel like it was forestry we contacted. I wasn't in charge of the last attempt, but I do feel like it was forestry. And then something happened where when they were finally going to help, they couldn't because there wasn't enough people or something changed last minute and it got canceled and then never really rescheduled. So I don't know. I feel like there was a lot of roadblocks, and I need to look into it again because it wasn't me who pursued it the last time, but I do believe it was forestry. So maybe that is the best way. I don't know.
I personally don't have any prescribed fire experience, but I have a feeling a couple people in the meeting do. But I would imagine that the location of the scrub preserve at the Conservancy would be a very challenging one to manage.
Yeah. Yeah. And the hospital, you know, is fairly close, and there's a school, and I don't know. It's not going to be easy, but if anyone has any suggestions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure you can get my email address or Melinda S at conservancy.org, and any suggestions you have, I will follow the leads for sure.
Thank you so much, Melinda.
Yeah, thank you.
I will give everybody a couple of minutes since we have quite a few different links in the chat. If there's anything that you want to copy and paste or open up those links on your computer. I won't close down the meeting too early, so you have a chance to follow all of those links and get some more information. And Wade did just provide Melinda's email address in the chat. So if you have follow-up questions or would like to reach out to Melinda in the future, there you go. And I'm not seeing any new questions coming in at this time. Lots of thank yous for the great presentation, and I will echo that once again. Fabulous job. I learned a lot, and again, I grew up in Naples, thought I knew almost everything there was to know about the Conservancy, but I didn't. Learned quite a few new things tonight, so thank you so much.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. And when the campus is open again, I know these are all strange times right now, but please come visit and check out the Scrub Preserve because it's pretty special for sure.
Yep, we will do. You know, as we continue on into the future, whenever the timing is right, the Naples chapter will be putting together field trips and reaching out for partnerships for events or volunteering. So our chapter will be sure to stay in touch with the Conservancy and see how we can continue to help each other.
Absolutely.
All right, and a last reminder from Wade, don't forget to vote and remember the Conservation Collier referendum. Thank you for the reminder. And for anybody who's still in the meeting, our next meeting in November is scheduled for November 11th. So that is not our typical meeting night. We're normally first Wednesday of the month. We're going to meet the second Wednesday of the month, November 11th, for next month. And that's to give us a little bit of breathing room in between the final election day and then when we're going to have our next program. So thank you everybody for joining us this evening. And thank you again, Melinda.
Thank you, everybody.
And have a great night.